Welcome to Dynamo's Dozen, the podcast that I bring you each and every single week where I talk about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between, never forgetting the talc. And this week on Dynamo's Dozen, we have another episode of the A&E Bio series with my right-hand man, Mr. Niall, the Shopkeeper Hogan. And today, if you can't already tell, we are going to be covering the ultimate one, the Jim Hellwig, Mr. Warrior, whatever you want to call him. We are going to cover it today. Niall, welcome back to the show, my brother.
Great to be back. Love coming on doing these at the moment. These A&E biographies are they're incredible, really, when you think about it. They've knocked it out of the park in terms of selection, in terms of coverage, in terms of telling a nice story at times. That necessarily is not a nice story.
Yeah.
So really cool, really enjoying them. A little bit of a slightly different slant to the dark side of the ring, which we cover on the Four Podmen on a Friday. But really cool. Really enjoying these biographies.
And of course, by the time you see this, you will have seen, or in and around the same time, you will have seen the dark side of the ring Ultimate Warrior episode, which we are going to cover on the Four Podmen. But today we're concentrating on the A&E documentary, bio, whatever you want to call it, on the Ultimate Warrior. But before we get into that, let's do some housekeeping, because these shows are brought to you by the Dynamo Podcast Network, the fastest growing, best sports, movies, entertainment, and everything in between network that you can find on YouTube. And it's so easy. All you need to do is like, subscribe, and get that bell notification in a gorilla press and drop it on its ass, and you will get notified every single time we have a new show for you. It's so
and you don't even have to send us $9.99.
You don't even have to send us, and you know how easily accessible it is. All you got to do is hit the playlist, find your favorite show. If you're into hockey, if you're into football, if you're into boxing, if you're into movies, if you're into horror movies, if you're into retrotainment, if you're into pro wrestling, if you're into pro wrestling debate, whatever the hell you want, you will find it there, and you can pick your favorite show and go through all the playlists. Watch it twice, watch it 3 times, send it to a friend, send it to your mother, send it to your granny. Everybody is going to like something that we have to offer. And also, before we do go today, this show, as always, is sponsored by Wrestling Mania, Ireland's one and only and oldest professional wrestling shop. And the shopkeeper himself is here to tell you more. Niall, what have you got going on? It's week 2 of everything opening back up, and I'm sure there's going to be something that people are going to like.
Yeah, back at it again. Had a few deliveries in this week, so we got in some AEW shirts and stuff like that.
It's always
so
good news.
We have some cool Darby Allin shirts in. We have a few freshly squeezed, and we have some Jericho shirts in, and we're about to get a delivery in of some real cool retro stuff, including the Main Man. And there's going to be some cool Macho Man stuff. And we even have some old school SmackDown stuff coming in. So it's going to be really cool. So keep an eye out. We're on Instagram, Wrestling Mania Dublin. Hit us up there if you have any requests or if you want to know any information. Currently opening every day, Monday to Saturday, 10:30 to about 4:45. But we can stay longer if needed, if anyone wants to contact us. We're just trying to safeguard ourselves at the moment as we reopen fully during the COVID pandemic. So yeah, great.
And of course, as usual, orders are available online as well. If anyone wants any more info, you can hit me up if you know me personally, or you can hit Niall up if you know him personally as well. There is nothing that we can't get. It's like we're like Red in the Shawshank Redemption. There's nothing that can't be gotten.
If we can't get it, you probably don't want it.
Exactly. There you go. But let's move into today's show. Niall, the Ultimate Warrior, formerly Jim Hellwig, Mr. Warrior, whatever you want to call him, the man has been dead now 5 years, 6 years, actually.
Yeah.
7 even. It's 7, isn't it? 2014.
Yeah, 7 years now.
Seven
Yeah,
years. Holy
7 years.
shit, when
Yeah.
you think about it. But yet, even after his irrelevancy for a long period of time in the 90s, up until he came back to WCW and then came back and had a bit of relevancy again and then was gone and irrelevant for a while, his relevancy just keeps coming back up in stages. And I mean, when you talk about the WWE and the cartoon slash comic book slash, just crazy rock and roll wrestling that came with it from, the late 80s and onwards, you're kind of remiss and you're incorrect if you don't bring up the Ultimate Warrior in the conversation. Um, what did you think of this documentary? We've obviously covered the Macho and we've covered Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, I kind of it brought us on a kind of a story, and it gave me like it did give me some stuff that I wasn't fully aware of, which I really like when they do these things. I don't necessarily like watching these biographies or documentaries when I already have experienced most of it and they're just regurgitating it in a different way. So I really liked, elements of it where they focused on Vince and how much he had to coach him like a son and stuff like
Mm.
that. I really enjoyed all those aspects of
Oh,
it.
well, wait, no,
Um,
no. Vince already has a son. That's something that we
But
don't.
you know where I'm coming from. In fairness, he probably coached Shane less. you know,
Oh, no, I know
um,
where you're going. Yeah, I know.
yeah. But I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But I like the way, and I think his daughters alluded to it as well. One of them said, I can't remember. I think it was Indiana. Turned around and said, "Or Maddie, there was a story to be told, and we have to tell the whole story." And I really liked that because that must have been very difficult for them as daughters. But I thought it was real mature, and
Yeah,
it was like for them, it was kind of like a decompression of a situation as well. That the whole story had to be told, whether you liked it or you didn't like it. This is the story. This is a man who was out in the wilderness for so long, you know, pent up with anxiety, frustration, everything going, and came full circle and recircled his whole life around again, and cleansed himself of all the bad stuff in it, if you like,
yeah,
and found redemption in the end before he passed away. And I think that's really the element of the story that they tried to portray, as opposed to, like another self-destruction job or a burial kind of thing. So that's what I really took out of it. I really like the way they brought us on the whole story, both good and bad, and then the whole circle, the way it came full circle, and the husband, the father, the family man, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was really cool.
yeah. Like there's nice elements. Like it's almost funny when you put the tree, when you put the self destruction together, then you put this in here in the middle, and then you put Dark Side of the Ring. You kind of compress them all together, and you realize there was definitely a troubled man that probably wasn't great behind the scenes at the whole networking side of things with his comrades. Certain people, yeah, certain people, no. And I think you find a bit of a middle ground. But I think what's great about this one is that you really get to see the background as to why he was obviously a little bit different than, say, you know the guys that were lifers within the business. I think getting to see the background of him being the skinny kid and the father leaving very early on seemed to be quite a delicate human being, in the sense of almost needed that father figure, almost needed that kind of appreciation from somebody that he respected. You know what I mean? It's kind of what I got
Yeah,
from a psychological point of view.
yeah. I think when you look at it, like, I mean, from following wrestling for years and years and years at this stage, most of the guys and girls who get into wrestling have some sort of flaw in their character that leads them to
Yeah,
pro wrestling.
yeah,
And it doesn't necessarily, for most of them, it doesn't necessarily hamper them. For some of them, it does, because it depends on the level of the flaw and the fragility of your character, if you like, and able to
yeah,
step in. Because what happens is the business brings you in, you catch hold of the business, and then of course it trusts you into a position where you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You're carrying the weight of that roster, the weight of the history, and the weight of the business and the morality of it and all that kind of thing. And that's a huge weight to carry. We've seen it break men in the past. It's broken Sean at times. It's broken Brett at times. It's broken Warrior. At times, it's even broken Hogan, as strong as Hogan was and stuff like that. So I just think when you look at it from that point of view, here was a man who came in. I mean, the dad walking out on them was obviously huge. I mean, talk to any son who hasn't had that bond with their father is absolutely massive. I know as a father myself, the bond I have with my kids is absolutely fundamental and huge, and probably the most important thing in my life. And if it wasn't there, I could only imagine how they sort of circumvent through life without having me as a sounding board there to sound off when they have issues or they want to talk or they want to do something. And if that's not there, then you will tend to go and try and seek it somewhere else. And he kind of found that in a coach, in a weights room, around like-minded kind of people. Um, and it goes through the documentary where they talk. I love the bits about bodybuilding as well. I was a huge Rich Gaspari fan. I understood exactly what they were talking about because I got into weights myself in a very early age in the 80s and stuff like that. And bodybuilding for me was huge. If you ask me about my movies, it's all about Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Van Damme, all these guys that were pumped up in huge shape, Dolph Lundgren, all that kind of stuff. So I knew exactly what they were talking about in terms of bodybuilding and the impact it was having at the time and the pressure that it put on people. And then I was very interested to hear how Rich Gaspari, who I'm a huge fan of, ex-Olympia competitor and stuff like that, and arguably should have won it once or twice, but didn't over politics. I love the way he spoke about how you put that bodybuilding mass on, and it's like an armor that covers over the issues that you have internally. And I can fully understand that as well.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, if you have any kind of flaws in you or any kind of, if you're sort of weak in any way at all, weights is where you kind of go to. That's where you transcend to, and your body covers up those other issues that might be fragile within your personality and stuff like that. In terms,
yeah, because you might not be a tough guy or something, or you might have been bullied or something like that, and you think, right, if I have this suit of armor, nobody's gonna really come at me. Do you know what I mean? Even just something as simple as that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
But even in Warrior, the way they touched on that, he was determined. Because he had grown up like this and the community, he felt in his mind, I don't think the community probably did it, but he had gotten it into his mind because the father wasn't around, that the community had sort of shunned them and looked down on them as a family. And he felt kind of embarrassed and upset over this. And he kind of put himself on that path to say, well, I'm going to show all you guys. And in the way he said it, it wasn't kind of like the way it came across, like, I'm going to better myself and get a better job and leave this small little town I came from.
He wanted to be famous,
yeah, he wanted to be famous, but not only famous. His line that came out was he wanted to conquer the world, which is huge to turn around and say something like that, you know what I mean? Being that fragile, So I thought that was brilliant.
I got the idea that he's either going to conquer the world or he's going to come back to the school with a clava on and blow everyone up. You know what I mean? Like that's how I suppose on the verge it seemed like that he was, and that kind of comes across in both documentaries, but in this one definitely. I think as we move on into the documentary, when he kind of breaks into the world of wrestling, I suppose this is where someone like me is doesn't necessarily have the respect for the Ultimate Warrior, the wrestler. And I'm going to word this in a way that's not knocking the guy, because obviously I appreciate, the impact he had and whatnot. But I suppose what I can't appreciate and why I don't appreciate guys like him and Goldberg is purely from the point of view that all the work that they put into their bodies and looking great and doing this, it's quite evident in both DVDs. In fact, I say DVDs like we're old now. It's like
VHS
on both tapes.
Yeah.
But even with the self-destruction, because there is a lot of guys like Bobby the Brain Heenan that can't just be shunned off and told that they're making up shit, because these are important and more important people in the world of professional wrestling, in my opinion, than the Ultimate Warrior, and they're giving their opinion on it. What kind of bothered me was that all this work is going into the body and the look and stuff, and it's like when you see him and Sting, it's like territories are going, we can't really do anything with them because they don't want to learn. Well, Sting wants to learn. The Warrior just doesn't think he has to learn. So he didn't kind of come in with that respect, because back then, to be brought into a business, especially down in territories like Memphis and stuff like that, people were taking a chance on you, and they were putting themselves on the line and allowing you into their business that was so protected back then. And to not want to be really taught and think you know it all already. I think that was one of his biggest character flaws getting in early on. Would you agree with that? I think that was his own. I think that was his first mistake, and he didn't do himself any favors there.
I think the problem you face there is, and I thought about it today after I'd watched the documentary a couple of times again.
And that comes across, Niall. Sorry to cut across you. That comes across in both the dark side and so that really happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who basically had, his personality and his character was so insular.
Sure.
And he was trying to succeed in a business that's such collaboration.
Yeah.
And that's what really came across in me. Like, if I'm having a wrestling match with you, me and you are dance partners, we have to collab to do this together.
Yeah.
But this guy was so insular that everything outside didn't matter. It was about the Ultimate Warrior or the Dingo Warrior or the Blade Runners or whatever it was. And even Sting alluded to the fact that very quickly Sting realized that he was going to be sailing on a ship on his own.
Yeah.
Even as tag partners, you know what I mean?
And that's Sting's lovely diplomatic way of saying, like, yeah, he was a Mayfainer.
Yeah, like, and I mean, and it's good that Sting was diplomatic that way, because in fairness, Sting's, he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
But I just think that's what came across right through in his character all along, that he always had that battle and that struggle with being, he was going to be the Ultimate Warrior. The world was the Ultimate Warrior's world. And like, going in and having to collaborate with other workers in the ring was more of a nuisance and an annoyance.
Yeah.
Than lending himself to it, you know what I mean?
He almost wanted to go in and do his bodybuilding pose down rather than have a wrestling match, you know what I mean? And people just admired the look of him.
And when you think about it, like, I mean, it's true what they say, like, in 5 years, he shot through the business to get to the top, you know what I mean? It was unbelievable. And
Fast
the character
track,
was outstanding. That character and him, if he had have opened himself up to the business and listened at times when he was speaking, and you can see it even when they go back and you see some of these promos, like the apology promo for the kid in the airport and all, like, he can't wrap his head around it at all. And Vince has to keep on telling him, it's only your work, don't worry about it, it's only your work, this is not a big deal. And he couldn't get his head around the fact, even that simple little thing, you know what I mean? Whereas if you turned around and you said that to, a Rick Rude or a Mr. Perfect, they'd knock it out of the park like that.
They'd be like, look, you done something wrong in the airport.
Yeah.
You need to make amends for it here. You know what I mean?
And remember, a lot of that we wouldn't have understood at the time, or we wouldn't have understood even till we see some of this stuff. And like, he just came across like, it was just, this is where you see the kind of, when we talk about the flaws in the character and stuff like that. And this guy was the ultimate promo guy when you think about it, because like his promos were just off the scale. But now when you look at it, you think, obviously Vince was in the background going, you hear Vince talking about, just pause for 2 more seconds when you do that and do this and do that and do the other. And he's coaching them along all the time, because obviously he was Vince's project. So Vince wanted him to succeed without a shadow of a doubt. He was the next coming after Hogan without a shadow of a doubt. And he should have made millions and millions and millions and millions. And I think just because of that whole, he grew up very insular. You hear his mother talking about it. He was a skinny kid who was insecure and kind of kept to himself, didn't care about the girls and all this kind of thing. And it was like that all the time. You hear guys talking about he had to have kind of, he changed in his own locker room and this, that, and the other and all. He never opened himself up to the business that gave the opportunity for the Ultimate Warrior to become the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, like, he had friends in the business, like he was friends with the likes of Dynamo Kid and lads like that would actually get his personality and enjoy him. But at the same time, they were friends behind the scenes, but then they probably didn't appreciate the way he was in the ring and probably didn't necessarily want to get injured, due to his kind of, I suppose, ineptness. And the thing is, like, I mean, he had some, people will say he had some good matches, like in one of our fellow podmen will say he had good matches, but like, he was carried to good matches. Do you know what I mean? And that's the truth of the matter. And like, I won't hear anything else. Like, the Warrior didn't create good matches. Warrior was in there to smash, get people out. He was the first Bill Goldberg, realistically, on a worldwide scale. And I think one thing with Warrior as well is that he kind of, he went into a world of WWE. Let's not say that Hogan made wrestling, but he certainly made wrestling a worldwide brand. And he went in and just taught I'm owed this because I'm selling as much merch as Hogan. But that's on a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year basis, my friend. Hogan had done this from 83 upwards. You know what I mean? And built it
Yeah.
to where that went. And I think that's where Hogan went wrong, or sorry, where Warrior went wrong when he started believing that he was owed exactly the same as what Hogan was owed and stuff. And
Yeah.
that doesn't come to you, just like that. When you can carry that title for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you can actually create three shows in different towns on any given night, then you get to have that. But the Warrior didn't do that, and in fairness, he dropped the belt to Sergeant Slaughter, a year
Yeah.
later, and because he wasn't able to handle that pressure.
I think it's safe to say, I mean, although he didn't have those, matches that you would expect, he did create moments that are
Oh,
enshrined in the legacy of the
definitely,
business, which is
definitely,
if there's lots of men have gone through the business that weren't exceptionally very, very good wrestlers, but
sure,
they still leave a legacy behind them of
sure.
moments that we love and we revere. You know what I mean?
Including
So
Goldberg. I mentioned
yeah,
Goldberg. You know what I mean? Like that entrance. I mean, did anyone have, other than the Undertaker? Did anybody have a better entrance than the Warrior? Even though it was just a maniac running to the ring with that music, the whole look, that big mane. He looked like a lion with war paint
as
running
Gorilla
down the ring.
as Gorilla Monsoon said, once the music hit, it was pandemonium, and it really
Ah,
was. And I tell you, the fan base, like just the pop he used to get, the crowd, everything like that. Like as long as I live, when people talk to me about wrestling, I never forget the honky tonk match. I
it
can
was
never forget it. He just comes out like it's 2 minutes in the time of a
incredible.
business that we've loved for
Yeah,
50 years, and you
incredible.
still think, I still, at least once every 2 or 3 weeks, I still play that on YouTube at some stage when I'm going along somewhere, and I just have to watch it again because I just think it's just one of those moments, just like WrestleMania 6 is one of those
And
moments,
it's funny, like there's certain people within our bubble that like to think that I don't remember these things because I'd be too young to remember. You kidding me?
yeah,
6 years old is exactly when you remember. 5 and 6 are
yeah,
when your memories stay with you for life. And I remember watching that on a Saturday. That whole, because Saturday night, remember they used to have the Saturday show. It
yeah,
was kind of like the matinee show, I suppose. It
yeah,
was
yeah,
on about 12 o'clock,
yeah,
and they'd show the highlights of, they'd show all the job
yeah,
matches, but then they had the highlights, and that was one of the biggest highlights one Saturday when Honky's in there and
yeah,
he's getting up, and as the Warrior's hitting him, he's still doing the shake, rattle, and roll, the
yeah,
the Elvis
yeah,
knees.
yeah, yeah. And he's pretending to try and get the jumpsuit off, and it
He's
was just brilliant. It's absolute gold. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no question about the impact that the Warrior
Oh,
had on the business.
anyone that
I did.
says anyone
I
that says otherwise is just
and
full.
like and I love as well. I love as well when people turn around and they go, for these 9-year-olds or whatever it was unbelievable. I was all in on the Warrior at the time, and I think I was 18 or 19. I remember Hillary's brother as well was watching WrestleMania 6 with me, and Hillary's brother was 20, and we were all in on the Warrior, all in on him. So this is not a 9-year-old thing. When they talk about a 9-year-old thing, they're trying to create parallels between, his thinking and the 9-year-olds. But most people back then, when you were back then, I don't know, like if you weren't a Warrior fan, no one was smart to
Well,
the
I
business
was,
at that stage.
like I said, I was 6, right? And 6 is a very impressionable age because, like, I was watching, and that this is a great point that lends itself. You've met my dad, like, um, my dad and my uncle were mad into the boxing and mad into martial arts and like the bodybuilding. They buy all the magazines and stuff like that. So they'd be a little bit older than you, but they were showing me this stuff. So that's how I got to watch, WrestleMania
Yeah.
6. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
so I lived vicariously through them. But literally, I mean, I had the first 1990 variant of the Hulk Hogan figure, the
Yeah, that muscle one. Yeah,
exactly, and I was just Hogan, and that was it. I was all in on Hogan. Boom, forget about. In fact, in fact, one Christmas, one of the gifts I got from my cousin was a little tiny gold framed picture of Hulk Hogan with the cross which hung above my bed instead of Jesus in a
Oh, yeah.
Catholic house.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and the only reason I got away with it is because Nanny Marie said, well, he's a good God-loving man and he has a golden cross, so that's enough. But, the point I'm making there is, the 6-year-olds upwards, like that was such a big deal. Like because you like who you like. I mean, you probably can't articulate what you're seeing. Do you know what I mean? You can't articulate the moves, can't articulate what's happening. All you want to know is that your guy is going to win.
Yeah, the only thing you understand is good versus bad.
Yes,
that's
yes.
it. And that's
when
the only thing.
When I was watching good versus good,
yeah,
it was like, hang on a minute. Well, like,
that's where you get the blurry lines.
What's this like? I mean, this wasn't written, because then a little bit later on, which I also remember the debut at Survivor Series of Undertaker, you're like, oh my God, I know I'm seeing evil here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is pure evil that's coming down to the ring. So with the Warrior, I think it was like his impact without a shadow of a doubt was phenomenal. But let's get on to, now he's been handed the reign. Now he's holding the 2 belts. Now he's Becky 2 belts, in 1990.
Yeah.
This is where it all changes for me as an adult looking back on it. Wasn't able to create those moments enough to, I mean, like, what's the most memorable stuff from Warrior's title reign for you?
I'm not too sure, because a lot of it is kind of, it's kind of like a blur at that stage, because the pathway to WrestleMania 6 was so big and so important that everything after, I suppose, when you reach the top of the mountain and you dethrone Hulk Hogan and you dethrone him clean, and you step into that position that you're now the next Hulk Hogan, if you like, everything after that's downhill, isn't it?
He had some good stuff, I suppose. Like, he had some good kind of stuff with Perfect and Rude, and you could see Vince is still trying to, help him and put him in there with, guys that can help grow him to obviously be that guy. And again, I mean, as many times as you put him in with Rude, I mean, there's stories about Rude having to fucking smack him in the locker room and all that, because he's just not getting it, because he's still careless and dangerous and whatnot. It seemed to me like that's it. He's made it now, and that's it, and we're going to talk about the dark side, on the 4 Podmen and what his wife at the time had to say about that stuff. But looking at it from the way A&E look at it, it seems to be that, like, he just literally felt that now I'm at the top of the mountain. I just need to. It's almost like and I don't think this is a conscious decision on his part, but it's almost like he just kind of coasted along and then got found out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just think, do you know what it is? I just think on the way to Hogan, he had Andre, who's huge in the business.
And of course, Andre is going to do what's best for business always.
Of course he is, every single time. But he also had Honky as well. And he also, he had the IC belt. And then he had Hogan. And I think if you come through that type of pedigree, and no disrespect to Rick Rude or Mr. Perfect or any of the guys that followed, I'm a huge fan of all that era and all those guys.
Oh, I know.
But I think when you reach that mountain, like what Ric Flair calls Space Mountain, when you reach there, and then you're on top of that mountain, you're the Ultimate Warrior, as you said, the 2 belts. It doesn't get any bigger than that. I think it can only get downhill unless you're a Shawn Michaels, or unless you're a Bret Hart, or unless you're a Stone Cold Steve Austin, or a Rock, maybe.
Or a Hulk Hogan.
Or a Hulk Hogan, or someone like that. I think the problem with Warrior again is, this is the insular side of him coming through again, that this is my world, and I let you step into this world to have a piece of this. And he forgot that, like, prior to that becoming his world, Hulk Hogan let him step into his world to have a piece of it. And, I think that got forgotten, even though he turns around and they both talked about, how important the match was, in terms of the business and stuff like that. But I just think somewhere along the line it got lost. When I listen to some of it, I look at, it was as if Jim Hellwig was looking in at the Ultimate Warrior as if he was a fan. and that they weren't the same person.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I compare it to is like, you know, sometimes we hear Hulk Hogan talking about Hulk Hogan when he's Terry Bollea.
Yeah.
But you
Well,
can't do that in the business. Hulk Hogan couldn't do that if he's standing in the ring with Rick Rude or Mr. Perfect or
well, that's it. Like, I mean, you know,
you can't be Jim Hellwig or the Ultimate Warrior. You have to be the Ultimate
and that's
Warrior.
it. Without blowing too much smoke up Hogan's arse. Like, I mean, we all know Hogan probably isn't. He still works kayfabe when he's recalling certain things. You know what I mean? So, in other words, he's not the most trustworthy guy on the planet when he's retelling the story. I accept that. But at the same time, you made a very good point. He's old school. And the difference is, I think the difference with the Warrior and all these guys that you mentioned is they loved the wrestling business and got into the wrestling business because they loved it. This was an avenue for him to become a star. And I think it's much like the Miz. The Miz was always going to want to get into anything that made him famous. There's certain people like that just want to be famous, and that's it. Doesn't matter what it is. Now the Miz is a different, obviously, kettle of fish because he learned to fall in love with this particular business and happened to just be the right fit. But you know what I mean? The point I'm making is that it's the same with how many footballers, ex-bodybuilders have just got into pro wrestling because it was another avenue after, either an injury that ended their career. I mean, look, we said it with Macho Man. The Macho Man got into the family business, but he loved it because Pops did it. You know what I mean? Goldberg did it because he was acquired. I mean, look at Jim Ross, right? Jim Ross, all he ever wanted to do was acquire lads from NCAA football, basketball. That's it. Big guys who had a look, get them in. You can't make someone love the business. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the difference between Hogan and Warrior for me, anyway.
Yeah, I think with Goldberg, I think Goldberg is a very intelligent man, and I think Goldberg was acutely aware of what he was doing and how he was approaching the business. I think with the Ultimate Warrior, I think it was kind of different because I don't think he fully understood, the part that he was playing and how it was going wrong. Whereas I think Goldberg was kind of very calculated and knew what he was doing. I think with the Ultimate Warrior, I think he was naive in kind of understanding the legacy that he was leaving or the path that he was on.
But I think their stardom allowed them to be dangerous, though, is what I'm saying, in the ring. Because they didn't really want to hone their craft. You know what I mean? They didn't really want to, you look at
I suppose for someone like the Warrior, if you think about the Warrior, though, I mean, the Warrior could have thrilled us for years without developing the craft because we still could have got the 5-minute matches that we still would have popped for.
Oh, I 100% agree. 100%.
But I know where you're coming from. You put him in there with a Rick Rude or a Mr. Perfect or, a generational wrestler or a real good worker or stuff like that. And it gets a little bit unraveled and it gets a little bit exposed. And then he's sitting back going, well, you're Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect. I'm the Ultimate Warrior. I'm supposed to be the attraction here. You guys are kind of, you could show me up, that kind of way. And I'm the Ultimate Warrior, and I just thought it was kind of like, I
and Macho gave him that, to be fair. Macho did give him that, you know what I mean? But again,
absolutely,
this is Macho Man. If you, again, Warrior could, and this is a tribute to Warrior as well. This isn't a knock on Warrior. So anyone out there going, shut up, Ian, you just hate the Warrior, that's not the case, because Niall, that's not the case. I'm just trying to be balanced here and be fair.
Exactly, and like the documentary, we are two all-in Warrior fans. There's no doubt about this.
You can turn this camera to the right here and you'll see how much money I've spent on Warrior merchandise. And as you have that little buddy there beside you. But I'm trying to be balanced and fair here. I think the Warrior could listen to the right people without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, we look at WrestleMania 1990. WrestleMania 1990. WrestleMania 6. Hogan led that match. Because as has been said, Warrior was absolutely nervous as fuck. We know he suffered with anxiety. Being in there with a veteran like Hogan, knowing what it takes on the big stage, was the perfect opponent, you know what I mean, for him.
Yeah.
Because Hogan's calling the shots here, bringing him to the match, boom, perfect, no problem. It's the same with WrestleMania 7 with Macho Man. Everyone knows how meticulous Macho Man is, and obviously he respected Macho Man too. that he would listen to these guys and go, okay. Same with Warrior. You can probably catch a slap in the backstage. Listen to me, motherfucker, or else you're getting this every night. I don't care if you're the world champ. Listen to me. Like, he could be dragged to a good match. And I suppose if you're Vince McMahon, you're a businessman yourself, Niall. If you're, if you're a businessman and you're running something like pro wrestling, you want your stars to have, you know, a little bit more than the 5 minute match because it's going to run dry very, very quickly. So putting them in there with guys like Macho, with guys like Perfect and Rude, he obviously wanted them to, I suppose, grow his skill set a little bit more so that you could at least have that epic match every now and then if need be. Do you know what I mean? Because it would get very boring very quickly. And plus,
definitely put
Hogan, sorry, I just want to say one last thing and I'll pass it over.
Go ahead.
If you look at Hogan, here's something that people don't talk about. Hogan didn't just go in and just kill all the big guys all the time. Hogan sold better than anybody. Hogan and Ricky Morton are in their own like stratosphere when it came to garnering sympathy from the crowd. Hogan, everyone remembers when he'd be on his side putting the hand out, you know what I mean, and looking like he was crying in there while King Kong Bundy is stamping on him. You know, and this is something that the Warrior didn't seem to have or think that he needed because he's from parts unknown and he's some sort of Indian spirit. You know what I mean?
But I think, do you know what it was? I think he grew up as a child in a position of weakness. And I think being in a position of weakness at any stage in his life didn't sit well with him at all.
Wrong business.
Yeah, absolutely. But in a matter of fact, I would say that going into those positions when he had to probably brought him back to those times and those bad memories and probably ramped up the anxiety and the paranoia and everything else out there that like it was just never a place he was comfortable with. And that's why I alluded to the fact that if you're an insular person in a collaboration business, you're not going to succeed.
You're not going to
not that you're not going to succeed, but not succeed to the level that you should.
Or last too long. Because I mean, Vince doesn't get rid of assets, does he?
No. And if you think about it, the connection with him and Macho Man, both of them were batshit crazy. There's no doubt about it, without a shadow of a doubt. And part of the reason why we loved them. But if you look at Warrior, it was very much about the Ultimate Warrior, the Ultimate with parts unknown, Warrior Nation, all that kind of stuff. With Macho Man, if you go back through all his career, and we've covered it on the Podman before, his career was always about being meticulous, but it was always about making sure that everyone came out of a match very, very strong. And he served himself up so many times for the good of other people. And the one thing that that disappoints me as a Warrior fan is that Warrior didn't actually click that trade off Macho Man when he was around him. That this is actually the success that's in the business. The success is not holding up the two belts. The success is not becoming Intercontinental Champion. The success is, as you said, after you do that and what you do with it. Who do you bring on next? Who do you make look good? How do you do this? And that's where people are successful in the business. And that's why we revere the Rick Rudes and the Mr. Perfects and the Macho Mans and the Ricky Steamboats and the Honky Tonk Mans. I mean, imagine if Honky Tonk had turned around that night and said, no, I'm not going down for you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's a collaboration business. It's me and you going into a ring and we're going to do our best to put on a great match. You might be the one that's going to go over, but make me look good because it's not a jobber business anymore.
And it's going to help both of us in the long run. Do you know what I mean? And I don't
Absolutely.
I think that's the Warrior's biggest problem is that he didn't want to learn that and he didn't want to have that part of him. I think he wanted to be the star. That's it. You know, he knew his own. You know, you hear this know your own worth type nonsense and all that. Yeah. Look, most wrestlers know their own worth, but we get into a segment here where holding up the boss that's made you a star. Like, if you believe what the Warrior done was right, then you don't get to criticize someone like Bret Hart at Montreal. Do you know what I mean? Because they're two, even though they're two completely different spectrums, there's something that one that loved the business would never have done, never, and then one that did for personal worth and gain because they were obviously having issues in their mind. And I think I think this was really the beginning of the end for Warrior as a WWE commodity until he obviously came back, and it's a bit of a nostalgia thing. Then, do you know what I mean? But at the time, that was the end of the Warriors pro wrestling career because we know what happened to WCW and it wasn't pretty. So
Yeah.
it's
But
pretty much.
we do have to allude to the fact that that time as well. I mean, there was a lot of shit going on in his life.
But
You know what I mean?
I'll say one thing though. We can make excuses. You know what I mean? Again,
No, I'm not justifying holding up the gaffer at the curtain. I'm not
no.
justifying that at all in any way, shape, or
Like his
form.
dad
But
passed, yeah, he didn't like the dad
yeah,
and all this stuff.
yeah. But what I'm saying is, at the time when you're talking about, he was going through, he was going through a heavy divorce, which must have been tough for him. And I'm not saying that he hadn't got a part to play in the occurrence of that. He did, 100%. But
Yeah.
I just think, when you've so much, when your life is after reaching that pinnacle and everything is so good in your own mind, maybe not externally. Because remember, this was very much like the Truman Show.
Well,
This was a guy
he's
who,
only human.
this was,
Yeah, he is only
yeah,
human. Yeah.
but this was a man who was looking in nearly at a movie, at another man who he couldn't correlate with himself. It was like as if the Ultimate Warrior was another human being to Jim Hellwig, and Jim Hellwig was looking in at this story of unfolding, and it had taken off at such a pace
I think
that
we
he'd been
lost
thrust
Jim
into such a
Hellwig.
position.
I think he became Warrior the day he won that belt. I don't think he was ever the same human being. Not from listening to people that know him and talk about him and quite clearly care about him. He just didn't seem to be the same kind of human being, you know what I mean? And we can go on about Hogan this and Hogan that, and oh well, Hogan kind of showed me up because he said that he was gonna give me a year to see what I could do. Well, he was obviously right then, wasn't he? Because I mean, at this time, Hogan wasn't going around in dirt sheets blasting the Warrior. This is all internal stuff and hearsay. You know, this man was the one going around bringing Hogan's personal life, which you never do, into shoots in his own like dungeon or wherever he was doing it from. So it's very you can understand why some people don't have much sympathy for Warrior and why the likes of Jim Cornette and all these guys don't have much respect for him as a man and whatnot. So because we weren't there, but at the same time, you look at it from the other side and you see people that do love the Warrior, that did say he was a great guy and did have a very, very
Yeah,
nice, funny personality that could break away. And one of my favorite wrestlers was a big fan of him, Dynamite. Um,
yeah.
so it's one of those things where like it's kind of like it depends who you talk to, kind of thing. And that's not for you or me to say because we weren't there, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's kind of when I look at it, I think it's a really bad road to go down to judge a person by a moment in time.
I agree with
And I
that.
think
I
and I think
100%.
the real judgment of a person, and I've said it before on podcasts, I said it when we spoke about the Ultimate Warrior,
How they
I've said
bounce
it to
back.
Jay.
Yeah,
It's how they bounce back and how
yeah.
they turn their life around and how they make amends for what happened on the way. And then you go back and you look at their life in total and you go, we had a man here, no doubt he was flawed, insecure, you know, his upbringing was terrible. His mother was out working all the time trying to provide, I think, for 4 or 5 kids or whatever it was. His dad walked away, even came back to town, used to go to baseball games, never even spoke to them or rang him, called over to the house, see how they were doing. Here's a guy from a small town, wanted to make it better of himself, got into bodybuilding, got into wrestling, chased that Arnold Schwarzenegger dream, if you like, didn't realize by what chasing that dream actually meant and the pressures that it brought of fame and fortune and all that kind of stuff. And I think when he got there, it became too much for him. And at times when he had gotten there, it reminded him of the bad things in the past of his life. Because he was getting thrust into positions, you see it when he's trying to cut the apology promo and all. He just feels as if he's so disrespected and has to be reminded that this is a work, this is a business, this is not real life. This is us creating a situation, and you can see it in McMahon. You know, you can see it even in that early footage, how much he loved him. He loved him. He was his project. And you can see how much it cut him up. And I think the only time we got Jim Hellwig back is when he returned to
Yeah.
WWE. And we
And
got the Hall of
let's
Fame and
finish
stuff
on the
like that.
positive. Exactly. I'd like to finish
Yeah.
on the positive. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that's really where we got Jim Hellwig back.
I
And it
think
was
so.
kind of like when you look at the Hall of Fame, and it's very weird and very surreal if you're a wrestling fan and you've been around for a while. It was nearly Jim Hellwig who was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
It wasn't
It
the
wasn't
Ultimate
Warrior. No.
You know, it was about him and his family and his wife and his daughters and the journey he was on, and that he had come full circle and been so happy. And, you know, he had made amends with who he believed was basically his father figure without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
It was nearly like he had gotten his father back, but not his biological father.
Yeah.
And that's how I saw it. That's how I kind of viewed it.
That's a great way of looking at it, yeah.
You know, and that's the way I kind of looked at it. You know, I was such a big fan of the Ultimate Warrior, and if you're a wrestling fan, you have to be a fan of the Ultimate Warrior for some of those moments he created.
I think for me, I'm the same. I had a lot of kind of disrespect for the Warrior after, you know, the way kind of everything ended. Not, I was still a Warrior fan. I mean, if he'd have turned up on SmackDown one year, I would have been marking out like a motherfucker because I would have got that entrance and that music. Do you know what I mean? So I knew what the character meant. But you know, after seeing the DVD and stuff like that, and kind of, you know, I know it was a bit of a burial, but at the same time, he didn't do much to lend himself to come out from that burial well either. When he was coming back and being bitter and kind of calling lads out and stuff like that. So, I mean, and I'm not saying he was wrong to do that, but he's obviously has to, you know, I encourage any man to defend themselves.
Yeah.
But you could see why you would think, this lad's obviously nuts. Do you know what I mean? He's quite clearly lost the plot.
Yeah.
And then when he's coming out and kind of making slogans against gays and black people and stuff like that, that didn't help either, which they allude to. And look, there's no defending any of that, and not in 2021, because they are actual opinions of the man. And I think if you want to try and defend him, you're more than welcome, but I doubt you're going to.
I think the problem there was,
it just seems to me that the Warrior gets a bit of a pass at being a bit of a douchebag when he wants to be than anyone else.
No, I think what happened, and it's a really weird dynamic when I look back at it. I mean, he found himself again in a really, really dark place at this stage.
But he's an adult, a grown man, though, you know.
Yeah, but even when you're an adult, Ian, there's still that child inside you that will live with you till the day you die.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, I understand.
And the problem for this guy is he was more driven by the child than he was by the adult side of it. And the thing I would say is, when you go back and you look when he was doing the college speeches and all that other conservative stuff that was coming through, it was like he was trying to find a new place for himself in society. And he was so highly impressionable.
That's fair.
You could have told him that we lived on the moon, not on the earth.
I'd say someone took advantage of him there on that as well.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
And the funny thing about it is, just to add to that, when he was in the wrestling business, if he had have lended himself to be as impressionable, he would have been so much more successful. Isn't that the dynamic? Isn't it?
That's my biggest problem with Jim Hellwig. It's that, like, you're kind of the guy that we wanted, but that we never got in the wrestling business. Do you know what I mean? I would have loved to see that. You know, I would have loved to see Jim Hellwig come in and have the attitude of, say, Mark Calloway. Like, mold me, Vince. Whatever you want from me, do it, and I will give you everything I have. But the problem with the Warrior is that it seemed that he was just so, I know what I want, and that's it. I'll listen to you, Vince, but I'm not listening to anybody else. Fuck the guys in the back. I don't care what they think, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure Vince is going, yeah, Jim, no problem, Jim. You're right, Jim, no problem. We got you here. Because we know Vince likes to play people against people too. So I'd say he had his own he had his own kind of cross to bear, and I'm sure if Vince could change it around, he'd probably be a little bit more protective of Jim. But just to touch on so people don't think that again that I'm just anti-Warrior. I'm not pro-Warrior and I'm not anti-Warrior. I'm in the middle on this particular show because we're talking about a show. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? If
yeah,
you're asking me my own opinion on do I love the Ultimate Warrior? Absolutely, hell yes, I do.
mm,
But I did not know the man at all. Certain people that are talking in these shows did know the man. So I
yeah,
would be remiss to say that I can't turn around and say they're all wrong. What I do know is wrong holding up the boss that made you
yeah.
for money. That
The-
is 100%, I would say,
yeah.
hurt Vince a lot. And I'd say the reason Vince said you become a legend in your own mind, it's true.
Mm.
That
Like,
is true.
probably a couple of things to touch on. One, if you have to explain to your boss what value you bring to his company, is the
Yeah.
day you should hand in your resignation, because your work should speak for
Because
itself.
he
You shouldn't
knows.
have to tell someone.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say in terms of the burials and stuff like that, we seen a little clip with Gene Oakland, and who doesn't love me, Gene Oakland? But you seen how hard it was with him as well. He had to ask the person that was filming and the director for the self destruction. Did Vince really say this is the way we have to go in on him? He wasn't comfortable with it at all.
No.
You know what I mean? Which showed, Mean Gene as the person that he was. You know what I mean? That this is not a comfortable place where he was. That, again, his love of the business kind of was clouding this and going, do we really want to get in? Is this what really Vince wants me to do? He was double checking all the time,
A
which I
very
thought was kind
complicated
of,
character, yeah, the Warrior.
yeah. But the other thing I drew parallels with today, I was thinking, when I was thinking about the Warriors' career, and I was having to think about today because I knew we were going to record the show, and I was thinking about how does that compare to current times, and I was thinking of one Drew McIntyre,
Yeah.
and how I was thinking of Drew McIntyre. If you remember, Drew McIntyre came into WWE as the chosen one. He was the Vince McMahon, the chosen one. If you like, the modern day Warrior, the chosen guy, and got let go. And he could have went off into a very dark place
Yeah.
when he went home, and he could have made a load of shoot interviews, and he could have put out a load of YouTube videos about this, that, and the other, and what he did and didn't agree with. Look at the path that Drew McIntyre took when he moved out of WWE. He went back onto the indie circuit. He trained his ass off in terms of his body and his ring work. He made a name for himself again on the indie circuit, worked every single show up and down the UK, Europe, and the US where he could, till he got back to where he believed he should be. And that's where I was drawing the parallels between Warrior and the choices that were made, and the modern day choices of, say, a superstar like Drew McIntyre. And now we see how much success he's gone on to have in the last 2-3 years, whatever it is. And that was just a nice little parallel that I wanted to mention
And
tonight
by the
on the
way,
show.
shout out to Drew from Niall and Eno.
Oh, 100%. But it just goes to show, and we're sitting here talking today, and there's a bunch of releases happening as we speak. And it's interesting to even think about those now. And you see even like the pathway that it goes down when some of these guys go off and work, say, for AEW or something like that, and the snariness of the little jibes that are thrown in at times. And I just, when I think, I can't have any more respect for Drew McIntyre than I have, to be honest, in terms of he had a lot of stuff going on at that time, and he had a lot of personal stuff going on at that time as well. Not dissimilar to the Warrior, in terms of his personal love life and stuff like that.
Well,
No,
no two
but he
men are
went
equal
back,
anyway, yeah.
yeah, but he went back, reinvented himself, worked his ass off, did everything he had to do because he knew, he says, I'm going to show them, but I'm going to show them in the right way. And I'm going to get back to where I believe I should be. And that's why even last year at WrestleMania, whatever it was, I was so happy to see him win. Even though there was no crowd, I was so happy to see him achieve that level from where it had all gone wrong. And he could have walked away. I mean, he could have walked away and he could have been working in a supermarket in the UK or something like that. And
And much like the Warrior, it could never be taken away from him. You know what I mean?
yeah,
He has his place in the history of the business. I suppose the best way on this particular show is is to end on a high with the Warrior, and maybe a sad note too. Um, that scene where he gives Vince the book, the little train that never could. You know,
Yeah,
that's powerful, man.
yeah. But doesn't that show you when we talk about the child that
Yeah,
came forward as opposed to the adult? It was
yeah,
the child that always stepped forward.
that was powerful.
Um,
That
I
stood
thought the
with,
most.
that stood with me. I have to
Mm,
say, because I was one of the people that gave out about the Warrior, but that stood with me like that one.
mm,
That Warrior death, fuck me, man. And I suppose because you were looking at all the kind of the dark stuff and the bad stuff, and then like just instantly just gone. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It was quite. And then seeing Vince, how much it affected Vince.
yeah,
Seeing Vince on that documentary that was on the network, crying.
yeah,
That was pretty powerful stuff. So like it was.
yeah. Well, Vince knows there was so much time lost and so many things that could have been sorted so much sooner.
Yeah.
To
Oh
leave,
yeah.
but I think the most powerful thing for me was when I seen Dana there with the two daughters,
Yeah.
and they said that they were at peace now with everything. And they were flicking through. Remember, they were talking about the old Christmas pictures and they were going through the photo albums. And I just thought the way the two daughters handled themselves and the way she handled herself, and even in terms of when she spoke about, you know, the stuff that happened at the university, and she was going, "What did you say?" And he told her kind of what he said, and she goes, "We need to talk when you come home." And I just thought the way she handled herself and the way the daughters handled themselves in terms of talking about his legacy and that he was this father figure and all that kind of stuff, and that his whole life had come full circle. Um, and the changing of the name to Warrior and all that. But like, I mean, he was Jim Helwig to them. There's no doubt about it. They were his daughters, and the way even he kind of like he used to work the kids by saying, next year here's a list of things you have to achieve, and if you don't achieve that next year, you could end up with the cold and stuff like that. That's a real father thing to do. As fathers,
I
we
like
do
that.
that all the
I
time.
like that.
It's the little work within the family circle. You know what I mean? That you
But I
do. It's
think
like,
that's his biggest achievement when you look at it. Like more importantly than
yeah,
because, as I said, these are pro wrestling shows, as we said on the Own Heart
yeah,
episode. These are pro wrestling shows. The most important thing is that you have a family and you bring them up the right way. And you look at his two daughters; they're both beautiful. They're both like training. One is
yeah,
training kickboxing and
mm,
wrestling and all, and or whatever she's doing. They speak well, they speak highly of their dad, and that's an achievement that he did with his wife, is that he brought his kids up right, without any kind of bitterness or
yeah,
anything bad, put his money into the right kind of ways. And I think that's the big success story at the end. So when we're talking about the mistakes that the Warrior possibly made, and his impact on the business, stuff like that, or whatever it may be, um we're paying tribute here, and we're not, for anyone that wants to kind of come out and throw stones at like the likes of Hogan because maybe his marriage didn't end up the way it did, in the same right. We weren't there either, and I don't think any of us have the right to criticize or judge anybody when it comes to um
yeah,
you know because when you look at Hogan's kids too, they love their father. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
More so than the opposite. And what does that tell you?
Yeah, what it tells me, and the only way to round it out really, is that the legacy that you leave behind is sometimes the legacy that doesn't get spoke about, that's left in private, not the legacy that's out in the public eye.
Exactly. And
Um,
we don't even deserve to know it.
yeah, and the funny thing about it is the legacy that the Ultimate Warrior leaves behind is actually Jim Helwig. It's not the Ultimate Warrior,
Yeah,
and
especially
that's
on that,
that's the only
especially
way
on
I can
that.
finish it
Yeah,
up.
especially
You know?
that last line he ever said. That was Jim Helwig.
Mm, absolutely.
And I think the best way to end this show is rest in peace, Jim Helwig. And I suppose thank you for
Mm,
for those moments, because as much as we talked about the ins and the outs on a positive note, the moments that he's left us with that we can look at and turn into fanboys
mm,
are just absolutely incredible. And some would say, Niall, ultimate.
Yeah. The peace that he found in death is the peace that he chased and only got at the end.
Yeah. Well,
So we salute him.
absolutely. So for Ian the Dynamo Kelly, for Niall the Shopkeeper Hogan, rest in peace, Ultimate Warrior. Great show. I have to say,
Always believe.
always believe and never ever hold your boss up for money.